We're live on Facebook now. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone. My name is Luna Banouri and I'm the Executive Director for Utah Muslim Civic League. Today we're joined by Farooq Mitta, from Joe Biden's campaign, apart from other community leaders. We're going to begin this discussion by introducing Farooq. Farooq Mitta is a senior advisor for Muslim engagement for the Biden campaign. Previously, Farooq served in the Obama administration as the senior advisor to the director of Department of Defense. Prior to joining the Department of Defense, Farooq was a partner in a law firm, Geller Mitta, PA, where he focused on civil litigation, business transaction, government affairs, and administrative law. Farooq has consulted on issues and published several articles related to Middle East and South Asia. Finally, Farooq is a co-founder of Engage, a nonprofit civic engagement organization which seeks to politically enfranchise underrepresented communities. Farooq obtained his law degree from the University of Florida, Levin College of Law, and holds a BS degree in interdisciplinary health and sciences from the University of South Florida. Welcome, Farooq. We're all very excited to have you here today. I'm going to begin our sort of questions around understanding how the Biden campaign is positioning itself for their outreach to the Muslim community. We have seen a policy document, but if you'd like to speak to us about how do you see it at your end, and how do you see Utah featured in this entire discourse?
Yeah, no, thank you, Luna, for organizing this and for everyone for taking time on a Sunday to join. It's really good to be here to speak to the community in Utah. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I started this role back in March, and it's been about, has it been 90 days? It's probably been a little bit more than 90 days now. Wow, time flies. There's a few things that I'm focusing on personally with this Muslim engagement program. You know, one piece of it is the engagement piece, which is doing events like this. And we've done events all over the country over the last 90 days or so. And I was looking back at my schedule and I saw that I've probably done about 60 events now, either with me or with me and policy people, me and surrogates. So doing the outreach, the listening and engagement is one of the main things that I'm doing. The other two things that I'm focused on are taking whatever feedback and issues our communities care about and making sure that they're elevated into the campaign and at the highest levels of the campaign. So whether it's issues on the economy or healthcare or others or foreign policy issues, I'm always in touch with our policy teams to make sure that the issues that our community cares about or our communities care about are, you know, first in the forefront. Now, those people sometimes come with me and do some of these calls. And we've done some topic-based engagements and we will do more. Next week, as an example, we're doing a national call on COVID with former Governor Terry McAuliffe, which will be targeted towards engaging Muslims across the country. And lastly, I'm spending a lot of time making sure that we have Muslims from our communities embedded into the structure of the campaign. So our staff, we've got a lot of Muslims working at our headquarters, which is completely virtual right now. And we've got Muslims across our policy working groups on domestic and foreign policy across a whole range of different topics. And we're going to be doing more state hiring. So I'm working to make sure that I'm recommending people the campaign can hire from our communities to work in especially the battleground states. Lastly, I think my two goals of this are making sure that I'm delivering Muslim votes and organizing that, and also in some cases helping organize Muslim contributions as well to the campaign. So, you know, it's been an interesting experience. I will say that I've never seen and I've worked around presidential campaigns for several cycles, starting with Obama's 2008 campaign. I really haven't seen this level of interest and engagement in making sure that Muslim voices are at the table and that we have a actual serious, robust program that's focusing on Muslim engagement. It's never happened this early before. We had a similar program that I helped run for Hillary, but you know, it didn't start till August, and by then you literally only have 3 months left. We started this program earlier. We've done a slew of events, and we're doing a lot more. We've put out a good Muslim agenda, Luna, that you referred to, that I think encapsulates many of the issues that our communities care about. It's at joebiden.com/Muslim America. Maybe we can put it in the chat here too. And I think that those are all positive things. I mean, we've had really strong messaging from the campaign on key issues that matter to us, including on Islamophobia, on the Muslim ban, some key foreign policy issues, some important domestic issues. So I think it's been good. And I feel very optimistic in the ability of our community to have a seat at the table, not just now, but also in a Biden administration if he wins.
Thank you. And so tell us a little bit about how you mentioned battleground states, and we are pretty sure that Utah is not one of them. How are you approaching these states that are at least trying to kind of participate?
Yeah, that's a good, I didn't answer that second part of the question. Yeah, look, I think Utah is obviously important, maybe not necessarily today from a presidential election perspective, but obviously you have your down ballot races, both statewide, congressional, Senate, and local. Remember that if we're gonna win the presidency and then we have to govern, I don't know the landscape completely of Utah, but winning back the Senate and keeping the House are pivotal for us to be able to govern. And then obviously like supporting your state and local candidates is really important. So I think turning out the vote from that perspective, I mean, we got to look at the bigger picture, right? I mean, we have this race for the presidency, which is obviously very important. But beyond that, there's other pieces that need to fit into play if we want to make sure the issues that we care about are addressed in the long run, right? Not just in this cycle. So there's like a 10 or 15-year plan that we have to be thinking about. And that includes what's the future of Utah look like? What are districts in Utah that Muslim votes can influence? And I think that's what I think you guys should be thinking about. I will also say that I think there may be resources in Utah, whether it's people you know in battleground states that could organize events like this, or even if we want to organize phone banks and stuff from Utah Muslims to reach out to Muslims in other states. I think those are also things that we can do either within the campaign or with groups outside of the campaign that I know have the data. There's a Million Muslim Votes effort that Engage is leading with a coalition of other groups. Maybe it makes sense for the Utah Muslim Civic League to be a part of that effort to help mobilize voters in different parts of the country as well. I can help make that connection if that's of interest. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. I think we have to be creative. We at least have to vote, but then we definitely need to get other people to vote, either in your state or in other states. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. COVID has definitely impacted our ability to organize with boots on the ground, but there are other things that can be done if we can't do that. And who really knows how that's going to shake out. But digital organizing, phone banking, organizing virtual parties or events like this, all of those things are things that I think can be done as well.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Charles to ask the next questions. And after that, all of you who have questions, please introduce your name and your organization and go ahead with your question, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Charles Turner. I'm a board member of the Utah Muslim Civic League, and I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Utah as well, working on my PhD in political science. So Luna, would you like me to ask all three of my questions or just one? How would you like me to proceed with that?
Let's go with all three, and then we can ask Farouk's discretion to answer as he goes.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I would say thank you for being with us today, Farouk, and thank you for turning our direction to Joe Biden's page for Muslim America. I personally was super excited to see that Vice President Biden was taking time to create a message specifically for our community to show that we're part of the coalition. I think that was really important for us as a community. So I have three questions that I'd like to pose to you. The first comes from Vice President Biden's Muslim America page. In particular, he addresses the positioning of Muslims around the world, specifically Uyghurs in detention camps in China, the unrest in India, which has targeted Muslim minorities there, as well as the refugee crisis and the genocide in Myanmar. Um, on the page, Vice President Biden says that he will speak out against these atrocities and hold individuals and companies accountable. I would really like some specific details, if you have any, of what Vice President Biden seeks to do, exactly how he plans to hold individuals, companies, and governments accountable for crimes against religious minorities around the world, specifically in the countries of China, India, and Myanmar.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, we have some more details on this topic and this questionnaire that we filled out for Mgage. I'll talk a little bit about it, but I want to make sure that everybody has access to this. If you give me a second to paste it into the chat. Just give me 1 second here to pull this up, because I think, especially on the issue with the Uyghurs and with the Rohingya, he's been very outspoken about that, even on the debate stage at the national level. Let me paste that here so you can find some more details there.
Great.
Look, I think he's talked about using some of our existing laws and regulations on, especially in the case of China, on even considering sanctions on companies and individuals that are perpetuating what's happening with the concentration camps. I mean, we saw what Donald Trump said to the president of China, where he encouraged it, I think, for the most part. So I think that those are the tools in the toolkit that he would use. I think, Vice President Biden's first step towards some of these things will be to, as president, directly engage with the leaders of these nations, whether they're allies or adversaries, and let them know that we're prioritizing and ensuring that democracy and human rights are part of our, or pillars of our foreign policy. I don't think that he's gone out today and said exactly what other steps he would take, other than maybe on some of these issues, like on China, and he said some things on the Middle East, which are also on the page. I think his overall bent is to see what the situation is when he becomes president, to empower his Secretary of State to have a robust State Department that actually can engage on these issues and provide our diplomats the top cover to engage on them, and for him to have the tough conversations that he feels need to be had on some of these issues. And that kind of connects back to his democracy summit, where he wants to make sure that we're inviting countries to participate who are owning up and taking measurable commitments to human rights and democracy in their countries, and not giving it as a platform for people to just come and to kind of showboat. So having said that, I think in sum, I think his view would be to see what situations are at, because there's so many of them when he comes into office, empower his State Department, have the tough conversations, and see where it goes from there. I know some people have said to me, well, why doesn't the vice president come out and condemn and take stronger language on some of these issues? I think he may be willing to do that in the future on some issues, but I think his natural philosophy is to kind of engage himself and see where the discussions go before coming out and just kind of calling out specific governments and things like that. However, there are cases where he has specifically done that, and obviously what's happening with the Uyghurs in China, and even with the Rohingya, are two very clear cases where he's called them abhorrent atrocities, unacceptable behavior. And I think on issues like that, he would be very outspoken and make sure that we're doing and taking tangible steps to address them. And also working with our allies. If you see, this administration has completely walked away from our international partnerships. And I think he would definitely want to make sure that we're not addressing these things alone, but we're bringing in others so we can collectively put the right types of pressure on governments that have human rights abuses going on.
Farooq, would you add the issue of Kashmir in this entire conversation as well?
Yes, Kashmir and what's happening with the Citizenship Amendment Act. And they're both on our website and addressed in a little bit more detail on that questionnaire that I pasted.
We do have some constituents who are from Kashmir here. So I think just basically speaking briefly about it as to how you view it in the Biden's campaign, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, I think so. We actually had a really good conversation with Kashmiri Americans and some of our senior foreign policy staff. It was a group about this big that I helped to organize. And the goal was to really talk to the campaign. And this is kind of back to what I was saying about making sure our policy priorities and concerns are elevated in the campaign. I was able to organize that meeting. And that led to us, like listening and really understanding where Kashmiri Americans are coming from and what their concerns are about what's happening in the current administration's position or lack of a position. And two, like actually getting to the right people of the campaign, right? To make sure that the most senior people are hearing about these issues. And when I've asked for support on those meetings, I've gotten it, which is great. That then turns into what you see our position being, right? Which is currently on our website. And I don't think if the engagement wasn't happening, I don't think that we would have gotten there fully, right? Because we really learned a lot of information about what Kashmiri Americans were feeling. I'll also say that there's been a real lack of leadership from this administration, which I think we would be very different on in a Biden administration. There's no engagement on these issues from the Secretary of State. There's no top cover for our diplomats from him or from the National Security Council. And I think what Joe Biden has said is leadership matters. And, you know, when people see our strongman in the White House, and these are my words, our strongman in the White House, what do you think other countries are going to do? So he really wants to set the tone and restore U.S. leadership on these types of issues and really set a direct tone as to how we feel about democracy and human rights abuses and do what we can to engage. And depending on what kind of responses we get, take additional measures as needed.
And does that overlap with your policy towards India at the moment?
No question. I mean, he's been outspoken on these same platforms that I mentioned about the Citizenship Amendment Act, about the National Register of Citizens in Assam, and basically has said that these are inconsistent with India's tradition as a secular democracy where all faiths are treated equal and all citizens are treated equal. So he's very concerned about it. And as president, he would definitely make that a issue to discuss with the government of India.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
All right, Farooq, this is Suhail Khan. I'm a cardiologist based in Salt Lake City. I'm also very passionate about public health. So I have two questions. First is just a comment, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but in a lot of like Muslims like get together when I go or dinners, our favorite topic always turns out to be like a foreign policy, what's happening to Muslim in different parts of the world. But I strongly believe like the most important election for us or any like community, whether you live in New York or Salt Lake City, is number one, your local elections. And then of course your national elections as well. So I think as a Muslim, I always think that we should focus more on the community development and how to put our Muslim community in a position where they have good education, stable job. And once you have like stable job, and then you can be more active in different social activities and try to contribute towards candidates that you strongly believe in. And that's where you can really drive your agenda. So my first question is, when I see a lot of our Somalis brothers who are immigrants, they come to Salt Lake City or Minnesota, or Syrian brothers, what should we do to put them in a position where they can be successful, they can be a very good like citizens that in the long run can have good education, stable jobs, that they can contribute towards the campaigns that they believe in. And that's how they can make a good social impact. Mm-hmm. That's my number one question. Number two is, as we see the COVID-19, and it's not going to be the last virus that is coming in with the world population growing and the people living in, in these big cities in a small space, and we will see more and more of that. But if I look around on TV or anywhere else, I really see some Muslim doctors who are in a position of policy making that can go out and talk about these issues. In any hospital that I work at, I always see doctors from India and Pakistan, especially from Pakistan, from my med school. 90% of our med school students, they ended up in the US. So how we can put those doctors in a policy position as well? Because we can talk all we want, unless we are in that level that we can be more like visible as Muslim doctors or physicians or businessmen, entrepreneurs. It's hard to change, the kind of image. Unfortunately, the Muslims have developed after 9/11.
Yeah, two great questions. So on the first one, I would say, well, you're 100% right. Most people don't know, most Muslims, I don't think even know that almost 40% of Muslims in this country are living in poverty right now. And we never really even think about that. So I think if you look at our Muslim agenda on the website, foreign policy and immigration are really the last two topics that are mentioned. And that's because I strongly believe that Muslims generally do care about kitchen table issues. We talk about civil rights. We talk about economic development. We talk about Biden's plan for education, where he wants to triple Title I school funding. He wants to give free college tuition to public universities and HBCUs to families making under $125,000 a year. He wants to eliminate the student debt of those same families. We talk about criminal justice reform. We talk about the issues that affect people's day-to-day lives. And just beyond that, there's a lot of plans that we have around how do we strengthen minority entrepreneurship? How do we provide more technical assistance and training? How do we make sure that more federal government contracts are going to minority-owned businesses? And that goes back to strengthening some of the agencies that have been weakened over the last 4 years by the Trump administration. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And to your second question, so I think, well, let me answer the first question clearly. Those are the things that we have to do, right? We have to, first of all, we got to get organizations like UMCL to be robust and strong so they can do the civic and political training similarly to what Mgage does, which is an organization I found. But then we actually have to also help people understand what programs are out there to help them from the federal government for either education, on economic development. Right now with COVID, there's a lot of other programs that are existing, but there's just a lack of knowledge. So we have to figure out how do we best take our community members and get them to the right resources at the state, local, or federal level. So I think that's really important. On your second question, I agree with that too. One of the things that the vice president has highlighted in his messaging towards Muslims, whether on Twitter or his Ramadan statement or others, is Muslims are frontline workers as healthcare providers and even retail workers. And Muslims are also small business owners that are driving the economic engine of our country. And those are two things where I think we can, as a community, punch above our weight because we have a lot of people that are in those fields. And those are two areas that are extremely important right now. How are we taking care of our public health crisis? And how are we supporting our small businesses that are employing millions and millions and tens of millions of Americans? So I've been cognizant to make sure that our messaging focuses around that, and the vice president has taken that on. I'll also say that we do have Muslims that are in our domestic policy working group on healthcare and on the economy. So we have people that are plugged into these roles as advisors to the campaign and making policy recommendations. The goal is that if we win and this campaign is committed to a diverse Biden administration, maybe we can find a physician in our community who could be at the NIH or the Surgeon General or at the CDC. We got to find, I don't know who those people are, and there is an outside of the campaign effort that's going to launch soon to recruit the people in the community who would be willing to serve. But I think finding those people over the next few months is critical, because if we can't get the people in, then what are we doing? We got to be able to make sure that we have people that want to serve, and I think we do. We just need to get them all together and identify them, and that's going to be a really important piece if there is a Biden administration.
And I think our feedback to you would be, when you do get into that position of searching Utah exists, and we have quite a few gems here.
Great.
Does anybody else want to go with their question?
Hey, Luna, I can ask the question.
Please.
A little bit long-winded, but my name is Kinza Masood. I am a director of a digital library organization. We work on a regional level. I'm also doing a PhD right now. So basically we're connecting people to resources that are basically based around education. And I'm doing a PhD in educational leadership and policy from the University of Utah also. So my question is that I think with foreign policy, it's pretty important. It's an important lens for understanding Muslim voters' preferences. And I think we touched upon that a little bit as it pertains to Muslim civic engagement. And there are statistics that demonstrate that American Muslims are starting to become more civically engaged, and through these kinds of efforts, thanks to Luna. But the motherland issues, we talked about Kashmir issues, we talked about Rohingya issues, are still important to us because most of the voters, I think, that are Muslims are second generation still. So those motherland issues are still important to us. But it seems like a lot of the foreign policy based around American Muslims are around national security and the war on terror. So with Joe Biden's campaign, I wonder how that might shift and help the Muslims have a better image. And
Yeah.
So I just am curious about, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I know that, we've, as a community, been very concerned about engaging with Muslims through a security lens. And if you look at our page, the Muslim page, it clearly says that we will not engage Muslims through only a security lens. And I've made it a point to not do that on this campaign. And the people that I work with have made it a point to not do that. We've really talked about a range of issues with Muslim communities. Like I mentioned earlier, we've had numerous conversations with Muslim healthcare professionals. We've done conversations with Muslim small business owners. I've done 3 Muslim small business calls since I started doing this job. And we've also, like next week, we have a conversation with former Governor Terry McAuliffe from Virginia about the impact of COVID to Muslims and small businesses. So we're really looking at this community from the lens of a diverse community that has a lot of different ways that Muslims contribute to the country. And we want to engage Muslims on all of these things. And when we look at foreign policy issues, it's not through the lens of national security. And if you look at our Muslim page, hopefully that message comes across. It's really about human rights and democracy. And what are we doing to play a stronger leadership role? And it's not about, oh my God, we need to help these countries so they don't come over here and attack us. It's about how do we do the right thing to stand up for human rights abuses. So I think this lens is definitely different from what we've seen in the past. And I give a lot of credit to the campaign and to the vice president. I also give credit to you, to the community, because we've been working really hard, many of us, for years of building strong institutions and really meeting with our candidates and elected officials. And if we weren't doing that work and continuing it on with organizations like UMCL, I'm bad with acronyms, Utah Muslim Civic League, UMCL, and others, I think all of that has had an impact to see this progress. I remember back in 2008, and I worked for President Obama, love President Obama, but I remember meeting with his campaign in 2008 and talking to them about not pulling hijabis out from behind him when he was speaking on TV and there was people behind him in a hijab. That was the conversation 12 years ago. Now we're in a different place. If you look at just a couple of days ago, the DNC shared a story of a frontline COVID worker who I think is either a nurse or a nurse practitioner in Philadelphia, and he's Muslim. And they highlighted his story for like 3 minutes about what he's doing. And he spoke and commented and this and that. It was a national DNC story, like a 3-minute video. So I think things are very different now. And I think that all of the things that we've been wanting are starting to come into fruition. Maybe not to the degree we want them to, but I definitely think we're moving in the right direction.
There's definitely a shift. Thank you so much. for your response to that.
Hi, Luna, may I ask a question?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Rohul Kudus. I am with the Utah Valley Islamic Center, but I am also a professor of microbiology at Utah Valley University. So my question is, I'm from Bangladesh, and the Rohingya issue is a big deal for us. We already have too many people to live in the country, too many actually, literally. And now we also have about a million more refugees from Burma. So now my question is, do the Biden campaign consider Rohingya issue an occasion of ethnic cleansing? If not, how we can convince the campaign to realize this correctness of this issue and act accordingly?
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
my ultimate thing is that Bangladesh cannot actually assimilate these people. So they have to go back. How we can make this thing possible as early as possible, because people are suffering very badly and the local people do not like them.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big priority. I just kind of pulled up the page on this question that is in that questionnaire that I sent you. And basically what the campaign has said is he wants to, or the vice president wants to, restore America's credibility to speak out on violations, which we already talked about. But he's talked about the January 23rd, 2020 ruling of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which calls for the protection of Rohingya in the country, and saying that if Burma fails to do so, the U.S. should request the UN Security Council to enforce the decision as provided under the UN Charter, and he will actually rejoin the Human Rights Council as president, which this administration pulled out of, and lead a global coalition to launch additional international investigations into violation of rights against the Rohingya. He also wants to make this an issue in the bilateral US ASEAN summit agenda. And he wants to also increase assistance to Bangladesh to help them assist with improving the conditions of Rohingya refugees in camps. And we also want to increase our refugee numbers. Right now, the US is under the Trump administration is only taking on less than 20,000, I think 15 or 16,000 refugees per year, whereas Biden is saying that I want to keep the number in my administration, or start the number, sorry, at 125,000 refugees, which will have an impact on our ability to bring people here from Burma, from Bangladesh, from Syria, from other places, which we're not really, he believes we're not owning up to our end of the bargain to help these people right now. So it is definitely on the agenda. It's a priority, and he's definitely going to do more based on some of the things that I mentioned.
Thank you very much.
I have a question from one of the panelists in the chat box. They'd like, so Farooq, I know that there is a comprehensive document about a lot of these issues, but some of us may not have seen it. So if we are repeatedly asking the same questions, I do apologize. The question I have in the chat box is about Joe Biden's campaign stance on Syria and the Assad regime.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, obviously Syria is an interesting and a really important topic right now. And our position is that the Trump administration has failed and fumbled on Syria policy. They undercut the fight against ISIS to the benefit of Russia and Iran. And we really, under this administration, have not done the diplomatic work that's necessary to bring about a real political solution. One of the things that Biden would do, well, first of all, he would really make a clean assessment based on what the situation is after becoming president, because it could change drastically between now and then. But he's talked about committing to our global partners, both in our partners on the ground, to make sure that we're supporting political reform or political solutions to what's happening in the country right now. On Idlib, he's talked about providing diplomatic and material support to Turkey to make sure that we're finding political solutions and really protecting the vulnerable communities that are in Syria right now. He's also talked about recommitting to be a leader on humanitarian issues in the region. You know that Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey have taken a serious on a burden of refugees. How do we bring a political solution that can help these people either live better where they are or create the conditions where they can go back to their homes? And he wants to really work within the UN Security Council on a resolution that authorizes even humanitarian access into Syria, even if it's without Assad's approval. It's a complicated issue. I think the main points I would make on Syria is that we want to re-engage on humanitarian efforts, re-engage on diplomatic efforts so we can come to a political resolution or political solution, support Turkey diplomatically on their efforts in Idlib, and really recommit to US leadership with our allies and partners through the UN as well.
So the follow-up question to this also is that a lot of the community sees this as an extension of Obama's presidency's miss on Syria. And so how would be Joe Biden's policy different than Obama? And
I think it's a question that's come up quite a bit. I think that there's definitely a realization in the campaign that certain things under the Obama presidency didn't work. So we have to now go back and try different things. The unfortunate thing is that what's happened over the last 4 years under the Trump administration is that the crisis was exacerbated, and what we inherit is going to be probably even worse than what we left when the Obama administration came to an end. I think there's going to be a lot of work on the diplomatic front ahead, and I think that all options will be considered by a Biden administration, but the focus will be primarily on diplomacy and seeing if we can come to a political resolution.
Charles, you had a follow-up?
And that is a very difficult topic, so I know I'm not being super specific, and a lot of that is because things are just changing so much that I can just kind of give more philosophical kind of underpinnings on it right now.
Well,
I would like to tag along that question.
Absolutely. Dr. Niang, introduce yourself and go ahead. Charles, please follow up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Niang.
Oh, okay. All right. My name is Amadou Niang. I'm a member of the Utah Muslim League and also a leader in the African community in Utah. I'm an educator. I have a PhD from the University of Utah, and I'm originally from Mali. And as you may know, the U.S. was a key player in the removal of Colonel Gaddafi, and which created a chaos in the Sahel region in Africa. And now that region has become a hotspot for geopolitical tensions that have completely plunged Mali, my country, into a huge instability, and which risks to affect the entire Sahel region. So I'm wondering if the Biden campaign has any plan in addressing this issue, and specifically because one of the U.S. allies, France, is really the one creating all the problems in Mali. Mm-hmm. So, what is the campaign plan to address the tension in the Sahel?
Mm-hmm. I got to be honest with you. That's the first question I've gotten on that, so I don't have an answer for you right now. Okay. But I'm happy to take that back to our Africa policy folks, and maybe circle back with Luna with an answer in the next give me a little bit of time, but I can get back to you guys with something on that.
That would be perfect.
Great.
Okay.
Charles, I know you've been.
Actually, I'll put my email in the chat. If you could send me a note as well on that with any more details, that would be great too.
Sure.
Okay.
Charles, please go ahead. I know you've been in line for the question.
I was wondering that I missed because the Zoom was not connecting. I missed first 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. I was wondering if you have discussed the Arabian Peninsula issue, including the Houthi and the war between the Houthi and Saudi Arabia and all the atrocities that is going over there.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Farooq to hold on to that just a minute. I am calling on Charles again. I know you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, thanks, Luna. To kind of take us back to what Sohail was saying about local issues and the importance of those for our everyday life. As I'm sure you're aware, many localities throughout the United States have tried to bar Muslim communities from developing and building masajids in their area. And then between 2010 and 2017, there was over 200 bills issued at the local level or proposed at the local level to bar, essentially we're called anti-Sharia bills. So I'm interested to know how Vice President Biden sees the role of the federal government and what the federal government can do to confront discrimination against Muslims, discrimination that's perpetrated at the state or local level, particularly by government officials, such as those two cases.
Yeah, so we've got a pretty detailed plan for addressing hate crimes specifically. I know that's not directly related to what you said, but I think a lot of it is setting the tone, I would say, number one. He's been pretty clear that Islamophobia has no place in this country and would have no place in his administration. In fact, I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of the media here, but we're literally just putting a statement out today or maybe tomorrow on criticizing the Trump administration for the appointment of two really Islamophobes to very senior positions in his administration. You may have seen that in the news over the last couple of weeks, and we just kind of we're just putting a statement out on it through the Muslim Observer, actually in Michigan, either later today or first thing in the morning. So I think A is setting the tone. B is showing what Sohail was saying earlier about what diverse roles Muslims play in contributing to our society. 3 is making sure that we're not appointing people that hold those views in a Biden administration and being very clear about that. And then 4 is making sure that our Department of Justice is able to adequately investigate hate crimes, has the right authority to prosecute them, and also what was the last point I was going to make? And also ensure that they're being properly reported, because there's an underreporting of hate crimes. Now, I know that isn't necessarily tied directly into anti-Sharia bills, because that's been most done at the state level, but there's a lot of things the federal government can do, even on this issue of policing and the types of reform and accountability that Joe Biden is calling for. I think all kind of tie into what kind of a message is our federal government sending, which hopefully would then be absorbed kind of at that state level.
Thank you.
So staying in on the domestic issues, does anybody have a follow-up question relating to that? I do have one, but I'll wait for anybody else who wants to.
I have just a comment. I can go ahead, but if someone else wants to ask a question, I can wait.
Hi, Luna, this is Ahmed. And regarding in the same context regarding healthcare, I just introduced myself. I'm a critical care physician in Salt Lake City. And what is the policy as far as healthcare going to be in terms of, one, expanding coverage and making, or is the Biden campaign thinking of universal health coverage or a public option to expand Obamacare, which, if it lasts this next challenge? And also in regard to simplifying or creating a genuine healthcare system within the United States rather than having patchwork of for-profit organizations that really don't address the lack of basic healthcare in the U.S. population?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So Vice President Biden's plan is to build and expand on Obamacare. So he has a $750 billion, not 750 bucks, $750 billion plan to build on and expand Obamacare. And to him, Obamacare is a really good starting point, and he thinks it's something that we should definitely build on. That includes including a public option into Obamacare, which would then have a non-profit option for people to either buy into or get access to. He's talked about, for example, giving premium free access to the public option for people who are eligible for Medicaid, but they come from states that have not expanded Medicaid access. He's also talked about lowering the limit of the cost of your income that you could spend on healthcare. The cap right now is closer to 10%. He wants to lower it to 8.5%. He wants to also increase the tax credits based on calculations to a gold plan. Right now it's a silver plan. So with those additional credits, people could get access to plans with lower deductibles and copays. And finally, he actually did this back in April, I think, where he said that he wanted to reduce the age for Medicare eligibility to 60. So although he doesn't support Medicare for all, he does support lowering the age for access to Medicare, adding a public option, and other tax incentives and ways that we can lower the cost of healthcare and make it more accessible to people.
Abdul Qadir has a follow-up question.
My follow-up is in regards to healthcare. I know, so my question comes.
Yourself.
Sorry, my name is Abdul Qadir Eftin. I'm a second-year law student at the University of Utah, and I work with the Somali Bantu of Utah, and I'm the executive director of the nonprofit there. My question is, in regards to criminal justice reform in terms of healthcare. So I know in your website, you guys mentioned that, you are one people who are incarcerated in terms of healthcare. So what exactly does that look like? Is the issue of mental health going to be covered? And what does that mean when you say you're going to fund mental health? Because I used to work at the Salt Lake County Jail, and so I seen the conditions in the jail, and those conditions are not conditions to even be talked about. I see the things that inmates go through daily. And so I want to know exactly what is the Biden campaign going to do in terms of funding for people who are incarcerated, and what exactly does that look like when you say you're going to help people, in terms of mental health?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I'm probably gonna have to get back to you on that. What I normally talk about is our desire to expand funding for mental health and substance abuse disorders, and the vice president's emphasis on rehabilitation versus incarceration, and basically saying that, especially for drug-related offenses, he's saying that nobody should be incarcerated for drug-related offenses alone. But I don't, to be honest, offhand, know the specifics of how we're saying the extra additional funding for expanding mental health and substance abuse issues would be utilized, especially for current people who are incarcerated. So I will have to get back to you on that, and I apologize for not having that answer. That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. Thanks for that.
I was going to remind you, we do have gems in Utah. So
yeah, no, this is great.
My question was, I'm sorry, I'm going to hold my question again and let anybody else who has any specific question around these issues.
Farouk, just a comment. With Obamacare, it's a great look that, yes, we are providing insurance to about 50 to 60 million of Americans who does not have insurance now. But again, healthcare is very complicated. And the one thing that we have seen with Obamacare is that it has encouraged consolidation of hospital systems, that they have wiped out the competition where it has encouraged these for-profit corporations like HCAs and like Steward Health of the world, and they can charge whatever they want. And if you think the Obamacare has actually, we spend about 20% of our GDP on healthcare, and Obamacare actually has increased that, that the money that we spend on healthcare. And the other thing is, the one thing that happened last week was the CMS wanted hospital to disclose what they charge for every procedure, and the hospital corporations are fighting it, right? I mean, that's also one of the things Obamacare has encouraged, is not only the hospital consolidation, but also it has really profited the insurance companies. So we really need to rethink what the Obamacare was, and we have to tweak it so that it can actually decrease the healthcare costs. It can actually increase the competition where there is no consolidation, where there are bigger players, they can charge whatever they want. So that's one thing kind of negative, I have to be very honest, that came out of the Obamacare.
I know a lot of private practices have been kind of gobbled up too, right? I know a lot of Muslim doctors in Virginia.
Exactly, gobble up. The bigger hospitals are fighting small hospital, and as you know, that if you have this much of consolidation, it gives a lot of power to these insurance companies as well as the hospital. And I've seen it firsthand in the last 10 years. And it has not decreased the healthcare cost. And if at this trajectory, that 20% of GDP by 2050 will be spending 40 to 50% of our GDP on healthcare. So that is one thing very negative about Obamacare, to be very honest.
Do you think the public option would fix that or no? Or at all?
Public, the thing is, if you talk to a lot of doctors, they would not. But I think that, for example, if you go to France, to any hospital, actually you can see on the board, like, okay, your hip surgery is going to cost you this amount of money, your heart surgery is going to cost you this amount of money. In the US, you cannot do that. You go to any hospital, they can charge whatever they want, and you cannot ask those questions. Public option, I think, will solve most of those things. Number one is that, once you standardize that this procedure should cost this amount of money, that will apply to any hospital, and the insurance have to pay that amount of money. And the public option will also help you in terms of negotiating with device companies, negotiating with pharmaceutical companies. I know right off the bat, it will not, politically, it will not look good. But in 5 to 10 years, I think, this is my humble opinion, that we will have no other option to go public in 5 to 10 years, because we cannot sustain spending 20% of our GDP on healthcare, and our population is growing and getting old. They're getting sicker. That's my number one comment. Number two is, again, I'm guilty of this lack of knowledge, but I was baffled, I was surprised, and I was a little ashamed too that you mentioned 40% of our Muslim community are living in poverty.
It's a study that was done by the Institute for ISPU study.
Again, this is kind of, I'm kind of shocked. And in this country, it is the richest country in the world, and the Muslim community, 40% are living in poverty. My question, what are the factors? What are the reasons? Because it's not the poverty. Poverty leads to bad healthcare outcome. The one thing we learned in COVID-19, it has affected the poor people the most. And the thing is, poverty leads to a lot of other issues, a lot of social issues, crimes, right? Drug use, right? So what are the reasons, and what is your plan to address this issue? I think this is a very serious issue.
I would add a comment to that, Suhail, also. I work with ISPU very closely. I can't speak to the exact factors, but in terms of demographics right now, almost between 25 to 30% of American Muslim population is Black, right? That itself will tell you, how this entire demographic gets affected. Secondly, we are at between 3 to 4% of the prison population all across the US. The Muslims are making up about 3 to 4%. In Utah, we are at 6%. So this is the intersectionality of our identity in many ways. Farooq, sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. You're 100% right. Yeah, I don't know. Other than what Luna said, I don't know what the exact reasons are for Muslims. I'm sure in that ISPU report, they probably talk about it. But, when we talk about tripling funding for Title I schools, when we talk about Biden's plan for college tuition, eliminating student debt, increasing minority entrepreneurship, technical training, free community college for everyone, and things like that, increasing the minimum wage. All of those things are there to try to bridge that income gap that's getting wider and wider. And it doesn't just affect Muslims, it affects everyone. So we're really, in my mind, like lumped in with everyone else with these issues. It's a common problem in this country with a shrinking middle class. And I think we're also talking about how do we make the right investments to create good paying jobs in the industries that will drive the future of our economy. So we have a $1.7 trillion plan to invest in clean energy that will get the US to net zero emissions by 2050. Now, that's an area where we can actually create new industries, build companies, and create good paying jobs for people. We have a crumbling infrastructure. So the vice president has talked about an infrastructure plan where we would spend more money there. Those are also a way to create good paying jobs. So we have to figure out a way to get people equal access to education and training, and then make the right investments to create the industries as a nation in sectors that are forward leaning. You see now more jobs coming in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and these forward leaning technology spaces. That's really the future, right? So we have to have a government that understands where does this country need to be to remain competitive 20, 30, 40 years from now? How do we make those right investments? How do we educate and train our workforce? And it takes a real cohesive effort by competent people, which we just don't have right now. So I think, there's no silver bullet solution to it, but I think a combination of these different things would help us improve, definitely.
Thank you. Staying on the topic of, our community and younger generation and everything, I know that there was a lot of synergy from youth around Sanders' campaign. He was able to envelop a lot of our Muslim youth into a lot of the policy and, being out there participating in the civic process. Do you see that alignment shifting with your campaign? How do we engage more youth? What are some of the things that you, in terms of campaign, are you thinking about to encourage them to come out and vote?
Yeah, I think there is alignment. It's coming around slow and steady, I would say. Look, I think people who are in our community supporting Senator Sanders were very passionate about his candidacy and disappointed when he didn't make it, and that's totally understandable. I think from the campaign perspective, we're doing a lot of things to engage not just Sanders supporters, but the supporters of other candidates that were running before to unite the party. We've established these working groups that you may have seen in the news that on 6 topic areas where Bernie's campaign and our campaign have put people onto these committees to look into what more can be done to unify the party around the economy, climate change, criminal justice reform, healthcare, immigration, and one other area that I always forget. We've also worked with the Sanders campaign on their delegates. We've worked with them on engaging not just them, but other progressives who have ideas on domestic and foreign policy. So we're always doing that level of engagement, and I think that will yield good results on unifying the party in the election this year. But yeah, we need to. I'm doing my part in all that and engaging Muslims, youth, and others that were supporting Senator Sanders. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the issues. And I think that if you take a close look at Biden's policy positions, there's a lot to work with there. And it is the most progressive, or the most progressive party platform that the Democrats have had in a general election. And I think that if we look at it fairly, we would see that there is a lot of goodness there that we could work with, and that parallels even a lot of the things that Senator Sanders was saying. And more will come out of some of these working groups, hopefully too.
Thank you. And extending that question also to how are you, a lot of us are engaged politically as American Muslims in a lot of conversations. But when it comes down to action, actually getting out there and voting, what can we do in our communities to encourage that?
I think we just have to push people, and we have to use our personal networks to talk to people. I think even doing things like phone banking, encouraging people on social media digitally, we really have to show people that their votes make a difference, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it was only a couple 100,000 votes at the most, probably way less than that got Trump into the White House. I mean, we could easily, especially in some of these swing states, our voters could actually move the needle and flip a state. So we really have to convince people. I think there's skepticism in our community that my vote doesn't matter. And we have to show them that actually it does. And we've got plenty of examples now of really close races that were decided by very few votes and really changed the trajectory of the country. We wouldn't have had a Muslim ban if Hillary Clinton won. We wouldn't have children in these detention centers separated from their families at the southern border. It actually does impact people's lives, even though it may not impact our life directly. So I think all those things are just important messages that we have to share.
Agreed. I'm once again going to open it up to the panel if anybody has a question. I know sorry, go ahead.
So I have a quick question. So with let's say Joe Biden is elected president, and with his first 100 days of office, what changes are we do we anticipate to see in terms of criminal justice reform, in terms of fighting for Black lives, in terms of fighting for the Muslim community? What changes can we see within the first 100 days while he's in office?
Man, the first 100 days, we've said a lot of things we're going to do in the first 100 days. I don't know all of them, but I will tell you that we've committed to eliminating the Muslim ban on day one. That's one example. We've committed to halting deportations for the first 100 days so we can get to the bottom of what is actually going on in the system and how do we best fix it. We've said a lot on criminal justice reform and on police reform. I don't know what we've said that we would do in the first 100 days. Some of it is legislative, so those would be harder things to do in the first 100 days. I mean, obviously ensuring that the DACA program is kept intact, which I think the Supreme Court basically did, but ensuring we can strengthen that in lieu of comprehensive legislative immigration reform is another thing that I think we've said doing something about in the first 100 days. There's probably a lot of other stuff. Those are the few things in my head right this second. But I think those are three important things.
Thank you.
And how about, I mean, there are a lot of programs and ideas, and how is a future Biden administration planning to fund those new programs, like education, free community college and things like that? So how are those going to be funded?
Yeah, I think there's different ways, but one of the main things that we've talked about, and I don't know all the different pieces of this, but rolling back some of the Trump administration's tax cuts for the top 1%. Biden has talked about and this is not extremely popular in every of our community circles, but he's talked about taxing capital gains at the same rate as income, for example. He's talked about closing tax loopholes for corporations. That's what I have less details about. But there's this plan about how do we tax the country fairly, right? I think that's a big part of it, to increase revenue.
So I'd like to ask a question. So I'm Abbas Ahmed. I'm the chairman of the Utah Muslim, chairman of the board of the Utah Muslim Civic League. And we've talked about Muslims institutions like businesses and entrepreneurship, which I think is very key, but also institutions like Engage and Utah Muslim Civic League are very important, because as you've seen on this call, we've been, because there's so less institutions, I feel that sometimes they come to us and say, okay, We're involved in the India issue. We're involved in the Iran issue. Now we're involved in the Black Lives Matter issue, right? So we sometimes get overwhelmed. So although I think it's very important to get people on the campaign or in the local offices, how do we strengthen organizations like that? Because I think they're going to be very important going forward.
Oh man, that's right down my alley. I agree with you. Look, I mean, I think I will tell you that the biggest weakness I think that Muslim Americans have in the political space is a lack of strong institutions. We have a lot of strong individuals that are doing great work, but individuals definitely have a role to play in politics as candidates, as staffers, as donors, and things like that. But we need strong institutions. I have seen firsthand, just with MGage's interaction with this campaign, the amount of, I want to say the amount of interest it sparks when you can speak for large groups of people in certain critical geographies, right? I think as Muslims, we've done a very poor job of resourcing these types of organizations. They never have enough money. They're always looking to live month by month. And for those of you who are like business owners, can you run your business month to month? No, you got to have a budget. You got to have a plan. You have to know how you're going to pay your staff. So like that's one thing that we got to do better. The other thing I think we have to do better is we have to professionalize this work. We need people who will work for these organizations, build a career out of it. And as an example, at MGage, just last year, we started providing, or 2 years ago, we started providing healthcare benefits to our staff. Last year, we started providing 401k options for our staff. So we can have people that will stay 5, 10, 15, 20 years and grow, and you have institutional memory. People in politics, as you know, it's relationship driven. So I don't want you to come work for my organization, stay for 2 years, build all these great relationships on the Hill or wherever, and then you move on, somebody else comes in, and we're building all the relationships over again. So I think that's the other thing that we've been like really bad at. And I'm saying like broadly, I'm not calling any one group out. And lastly, I think that we've been bad at focus. This stuff is not that hard. It's not rocket science, but I have found that most people who want to focus on Muslim political engagement, they kind of do it as another thing on top of the 10 other things that they're doing. And while I think it's good for some people to do that, we have to have some people at the board level, not like the staff level, who are just all in on this. Like this is like, I'll give you my own example. I don't sit on any other board except for MGage. That's it. I don't do anything else. I usually say no to it because I'm firmly focused on this. And we need other people in your organization and in others who are like, you know what, this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm not doing anything else. Not until this mission is stable in a place where I could kind of veer off and do other things. So I think that focus is severely lacking in our communities.
I think just to add on to what you're saying is I think that it kind of loops back in, because if it's not sustainable, right, somebody's got to do 10 other things, right, so they can survive, you know, because they can't, you know, if they just sat on one, they wouldn't be able to focus. So I think it really, right?
Well, I mean 10 other volunteer things. Like I'm on the board of the mosque, and I'm the board of UPNA, and I'm on the board of this, I'm on the board of that. And by the way, I'll also be on the board of, Utah Muslim Civic League. And Luna's like, man, like I need you to give me 10 or 15 hours a week. And you're like, man, I got like all these other boards that I'm on and I can't do it. So I think that's kind of where I was coming at it from, you know?
And then just one last thing to add on to your other point, I think in our community, we had two issues to when we started rolling. One was that people thought that their vote doesn't count, like you said, like there actually is not going to be counted because some of the countries that they came from, you know, there was voter fraud and all that. So we made them believe that, hey, your vote's going to count. And second, they thought that, hey, because, you know, we might be Somali or Bosnian or Pakistani, our one minority group doesn't represent enough to change the election. So we were working with different campaigns, and one of in the main districts in Utah, one of the congressmen won by 700 votes and 24 out of the recount. And I mean, we have around 15,000 votes. So our community after that really started believing and has started giving us a lot more opportunity. But then it just goes back to your point that, we need to make our organization more robust and planned out. So
yeah, and we have to come up with a unifying message, right? Because our communities are so diverse. If we get into the weeds of everything everyone cares about, we'll never have any common ground, right? So I think there's a good opportunity to do that around domestic issues, around Muslim empowerment, Islamophobia, and really creating a space where we can, as a community, grow and progress to a place where then people can feel empowered to then on their own go after their individual or smaller community interests. We have to start with a big tent, and we got to bring everyone into that tent to the best of our ability. And then, we can, I know with Engage, we pick, for example, and I'm kind of switching hats for a second, we pick like 2 or 3 policy items a year. And like, because of capacity issues, we just don't really do more than that. And mostly they're domestic issues. So I think we've got to find a way in all these different organizations to come up with a unifying theme that can unite our communities and not divide them. But at the same time, when people have issues that they care about, whether it's Syria or Palestine or criminal justice reform, that there's space for them to do that individually or in their communities and get support. But it's not like something that's a source of division as to kind of how we operate day to day. You know what I mean? It's not easy. It's very difficult, actually.
By the way, just this whole thing about Big Tent just made me smile a little bit. Have you seen the Hassan Minhaj thing about the Big Tent?
I don't think I've seen. Is that recent or no?
Yeah, it's a little bit funny, but it's like you put everything in one box, but then what do you stand for and what do you not stand for?
Yeah,
it's a little bit.
It's a problem.
Yes, it's a little bit of a problem though with that too.
It's tough. It's very tough.
It's great. It's wonderful, but at the same time, it can be a little bit of a problem.
Look, I think my opinion is that we need to stand for things, and this is way off topic, but I feel like I should say it. I think we should stand for things that the values of our faith teach us to stand for, and actually focus on a lot of domestic issues. I think that's where you can work closer with allies and other communities. Like something like, I remember sitting in one of our board meetings, this is now 5 or 6 years ago, so I don't want to throw our board under the bus, but like sitting in a board meeting and we were talking about what are the issues we should focus on. And I brought up climate change, and like nobody else raised their hand and said climate change. And I'm thinking in my head, like, this should be like a real Islamic issue, like safeguarding the earth and, protecting God's creation, leaving the earth in a better place for our children. But like nobody raised their hands when I said that. So I think we have to really rethink, what do we actually stand for and what are our values all about, right? And that I'm just using that as an example. It could be a lot of different things, but I think we got to think a little bit outside of the box on that too,
And I think that relates to that sort of intergenerational gap. A lot of Muslim youth are involved in climate change, but then they're not doing it from our forums. They're doing it from the mainstream forum. And going back to your earlier point, I think if we all change our middle name and make it to say condemn, because we don't condemn enough, and that becomes like the main focus of Muslim organizations right now. We are constantly asked to condemn this and condemn that. And if we change our middle name, probably it'll become a little easier to exist in a sort of thing. We just have about 10 minutes left. So I once again want to make sure that everybody has had a chance to ask a question. There was one question by Mr. Kudus that I, at that time, shortened because we had spoken quite a bit about the foreign policy. But if you'd like to ask again, or if you remember, Farouk, and would like to address that.
I can address it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Vice President Biden gave a speech in, I think, May of 2019, which was one of his first major foreign policy speeches as a candidate for president. And he talked about ending endless wars of the US. And his main example he pointed to was US support for the war in Yemen. And he's committed to ending the US support for the war and not giving Saudi Arabia a blank check, but also making sure that we're working to help on the humanitarian front there as well. I'm not sure if you're, Rahul, if you're on mute, if you're talking to us or somebody else.
Rahul Sahib, you're muted. I'm not sure if you're speaking to us.
Oh, uh, yeah, your speech on the matter is very clear. Thank you very much. Now, besides money, what do you expect? What we can do? What local people can do for this Biden campaign?
Yeah, I mean, look, money should be votes are, I would ask for your votes over money any day. I think we need to make sure we're turning out the vote. We need to make sure that you're talking to your friends and networks to turn out the vote. If you guys have networks in other states that could do these types of events, specifically, you guys are close to Nevada, and I'm not, probably that's the swing state in Arizona. Is Arizona close to you guys?
Yeah,
I can't remember the
borders.
exact.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that working with communities in these other battleground states is important as well. And we are planning a national Muslim American fundraiser for the Biden campaign. So if there are people that want to donate, I think doing it at that time would really be a good way for Utah to participate with all the other states in an event like that. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, we got to turn out the vote. We can't let anybody sit this one out. I don't care what state you're in. Like, we have to send a message. This is the time for our community specifically to send a message.
Yes, I think many people are eager, but they do not know exactly how to contribute beside writing a check. But writing check alone will not be sufficient.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that when people feel like that, oh, we think we are going to win the election, as did Hillary Clinton's campaign. I heard that she even didn't neglected to go in places in many cities. She didn't even campaign. So those kind of inertia can actually destroy progress.
Yeah, and I would say ignore the polls. The polls are meaningless right now. We're running like we're behind. That's basically it. And that's how it's going to be between now and election day.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I just had a comment in terms of one, it was also like eye-opening for me that 40% of Muslims in the US are living, below the poverty line. And I think part of that is my fault that I don't, we kind of live in silos that the Muslim community for me might mean, people from the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East, but we don't know what the actual Muslim community is made of in the US. That speaks to my ignorance. But I think the Muslim Civic League here is doing, I think a great job in trying to bring us all together and, increasing our awareness of the issues, which brings to mind that, all of us from different parts of the world who are living here all the Muslims are kind of drowning in so many domestic or regional issues, whether it is in the Middle East, whether it is in Africa, whether it is in Kashmir, that there is kind of an inability to connect with other members of the community who are going through similar traumas in their own world. And which the question I wanted to bring up is that we talk about democracy, we talk about democratization, and there's the US, I think since its inception has always had like aspirational goals and then goals that it has been able to achieve or failed at them. In terms of defining what democracy means for not just the country here, but globally, for small communities, for minorities living in oppressive regimes, whether they are dictatorial or so-called democratic regimes using state violence. What is the Biden campaign? How is it going to define what does democracy mean? Is it majoritarian rule and that's how it is, the new definition of democracy, or what kind of safeguards would the Biden campaign put in to make it truly democratic, where the minorities in whatever country they are have a voice?
Thank you, Ahmed Bhai, for that question. Farooq, because we have just about 4 minutes left, I would encourage you to take this question, but also kind of speak to your parting words with us, things that we need to look at and understand so that we can have a cohesive message for you from you.
Yeah, that's a really that's a good question. I don't think I have a clear answer for that, but we've talked about equal rights for citizens, for example. Those are kind of ideas and concepts that I've been in conversations with others in the campaign. But quite honestly, I do not want to misspeak on this topic because it can get a little nuanced, and I don't want to. I just don't want to. I don't want to make a comment that may not reflect, that may be more of my opinion than the campaign's opinion. So I probably will not go much further than that, if that's okay. And I apologize. I just don't have a clear answer for you on that. But it's a very good question, and I will look through our documents and see if I can dig something up to send over to Luna. Look, I think it's clear to everyone that this is an important election. I think we really have an opportunity to send a message and to make sure that we get rid of Trump, we elect somebody we can work with, and that we dissuade other candidates from scapegoating Muslims the way this administration and past Republican administrations have. I think we should think through what more we can do together, whether it's in Utah or in other places. I know Luna's working on a Muslims for Biden group in Utah. Maybe we can use that to springboard some of these other activities once that's up and running. I know you guys put this event together, but if you want to have anybody added to my weekly kind of campaign digest that I send out with updates, send me those people's contact information. I'll add them in, so at least people can get up to date. People have been saying to me, "Where's Biden? Where's Biden?" And he's actually been doing a lot of stuff, but like we just, it's not easy. At least it's easier now, but it wasn't as easy back when Trump was doing his daily briefings to get the message out when he was kind of hogging that primetime TV slot. So I've been sending out this weekly newsletter that goes through all of our interview, media, TV. We have a Muslims for Biden Facebook page you can like, and we put updates there. But let's keep the dialogue going. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you guys.
Thank you so much. Farooq, I just wanted to send a message to the campaign through you that it is people like you who connect to the community and give us that confidence that our voices are being heard, that we are not left out of this conversation. So we do want to thank them to have somebody like you represent, and for you to be so readily available to us to be able to interact and actually have questions. And I also really appreciate the space that you created where you said some of the questions you don't have answers to, and that you will look them up. That allows us for further engagement. That allows us for us to understand that there are things that are beyond your sort of realm at the moment, but that doesn't mean that you will not pay attention to them and that you will take them forward on our community's behalf. I do also want to thank everybody. As you can see, Sunday afternoon, we have some fires in the suburbs going on. A couple of our community members have had to evacuate and so on. But it takes commitment to show up on a day off and engage. So I want to thank everybody. And I also just would like to reiterate that the important thing is to get out and vote and stay engaged. You will always find Utah Muslim Civic League as an open forum for every Muslim identifying person in Utah, and our goals are your goals. So continue your engagement with us. Thank you, everyone. I hope you guys have, good rest of your Sunday.
Thanks. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.